Hello and welcome back to Logical Magic Examining Esoterica. Hey guys, I have a solo episode today in which we are teaching some magic. We're going to learn some magic for healing. It can be used for other purposes. I'll get into that in a moment. But I'm talking about magical constructs and how you can use them to heal and how easy they are to use. And you do not need to be part of a practice to start using a magical construct to help heal your anxiety, your depression, fear. Sometimes it can be about anger as well, but it doesn't work as well with magical constructs to use them for anger, and I'll get into that in just a moment. So we're talking about golems, which are a form of magical construct, dolls and poppets. Now, if you have a negative reaction to that, remember these things were actually created as healing constructs at first to do sympathetic magic. Now, that's from a time of superstition before there was a lot of medical evidence behind what worked, what didn't. It was something that was used, and you might think of it as a witch doctor thing, but it's not really. It was used in folk magic quite a bit. And if somebody had an ailment, they would create a doll or a poppet in order to pack herbs around the particular limb that was supposed to be broken, and you would bind it up and you'd pray over it and you would help activate it. And that was supposed to send healing energy into that person. When you create a magical construct, you are sending your energy into that construct in order to heal. So that's what today's topic is how to use magical constructs, which are golems, poppets, and dolls, in order to achieve things within your life and to clear negative energies, and also sometimes to be able to help you clear your karma. My name is Elaine. You can find me at therisingmoon.com exclusively. That's the only way to book me for a tarot card reading or a life coaching session. If you need to know more about magic, then a life coaching session would be one of the things that you would want to book. You can find me at Chromecast at The Rising Moon on YouTube, which is where I put the video versions of these particular interviews and discussions, sometimes lessons. And then I also have a Patreon where I do Spirit Guide weekly and Spirit Guide monthly readings. I have been teaching tarot in reverse, but I've been on a little bit of break from that. As during the winter, I do a lot of resolution of old karma work and generational trauma and generational curses, which is where our topic comes in today. So that's the housekeeping out of the way. Let's get talking about the magic. So what is a golem? If you're thinking about Lord of the Rings, no, that is not what we're talking about. A golem is typically made out of natural ingredients, sometimes earth, sometimes clay, sometimes sticks, rags, dolls. That kind of thing, in which we associate them with voodoo dolls, with people inserting pins into people to cause them suffering, which is the opposite energy of the healing energy that sympathetic magic can be used for. Please remember, voodoo is an actual religion, and it's part of a practice, and how it has been depicted in the media is not what it really is. So remember, the sensationalized things that you've seen around some of these completely ignore the greater macro picture of what a practice does, which is to connect people to their ancestral magic, to their own personal power, to their higher self, and to get themselves in magical flow. And so something like voodoo has all kinds of things involved in it that the movies just pick and choose oh, that seems creepy. And so we're going to sensationalize it and we're going to use it in a dramatic fashion. I'm not a voodoo practitioner, and that is one thing that you need to remember. If something is part of a closed practice, the only thing you can do is study the elements of it and then reconstruct it in a different form for your own uses, which is what folk magic does a great deal. So I'm going to teach you really quickly how you might want to make. We're going to work with a doll instead of a golem, because that usually does mean digging up earth, and you can get it from different sources for different things. All you need for a doll, and it's best to use one that it has no face on it. So you don't want to go and purchase a doll with a face. The easiest thing to do to heal yourself is to take an old t-shirt that you have, and you're going to lay it down, and you're going to draw out. You can use a gingerbread man form in order to get the shape of a person. If you're like, I cannot draw, there's no impediment to making this particular doll. Just make it a little bit bigger than your natural instincts will be, because you're going to stuff that particular doll with the cut up remnants of that t-shirt. So you lay it down, you draw out the outline of basically a gingerbread man or a doll shape. And then you're going to cut up the rest of it to make it your filling for it. Stitch that up on the outside. You take the doll form, you stitch it up on the outside. If you cannot sew, you're not going to be able to do this part. You can buy rag dolls from a place like Michael's, Joanne Fabrics. So you're not cut off from it, but you will have to replace the stuffing with the shredded up t-shirt or something that has had been in personal contact with you. And that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to make a magical construct of yourself to help you deal with a particular energy that may have been holding you back, that you're trying to often release generational trauma or curses or the buildup of karma. And remember, I'm always trying to get people to understand karma is not rewards or punishments. It is a lesson learned about what results from the actions that we take. And so if you are, bad karma is like, well, you didn't consider other people, you were entirely selfish, you were greedy, you were vengeful, whatever it might be, and you caused damage to others. So you have to deal with that energy that you've created and put out into the world, whether you did so willingly and knowingly, or whether you simply were completely divorced from the idea that we are all one and that we have an obligation to one another. So karma is not quite what people understand it to be, but one of the ways that you can do release your karma is simply to change your inner world. If you've had a history of like, hey, I did something I'm not very proud of, which is usually a trauma response. One of the most difficult things that I did in all the research that I did around trauma was understanding that everything I had struggled with was literally like it was a diagnosis of a trauma. It was a symptom of all of the trauma I went through as a child. And a lot of people have, and I am fine. The only reason I bring it up so frequently is that everybody else needs to know, no matter what burdens you have been saddled with through your formative experience, you can do it. You can heal. Don't give up on yourself. Keep going. No matter how severe it is, if you really put in the effort, you will make the progress. Now, sometimes there are needs for medications. And part of the reason I wanted to go into this particular subject of how to make a doll to help with things is that so often my clients are on antidepressants and they're not working. So these are steps to take if you're dealing with fear and anxiety. And what you want to do is think of it like, Mexican worry dolls. If you're not familiar with them, they're often shows in novelty shops. And they're a little basket and little tiny dolls, and you're supposed to tell your troubles to them, and then you put it in the basket and the dolls, work it out. What you're really doing is projecting your energy into those dolls, which is a way of releasing it. Now, we all have to do our conscious work, but it is one of the ways to shed energy. It is one of the ways to release an attachment. In Buddhism, releasing attachment is very, very important to achieving spiritual nirvana. All of these basic concepts in spirituality, they're universal. Nobody completely owns them. If it works in one practice, it can work in another, which is why if you're interested in something from a closed practice, you can study the elements of it, and then you do have to do it in your own way. Meaning you need to change something, you need to make it your own. Usually it's if they're summoning a god or an entity or a spirit that you do not fully understand, do the research on that and then summon what is appropriate to you. So if you're trying to do healing, the Archangel Raphael and Celestial and Angelic Magic is the one that I would be summoning for all of this. So you make the magical construct with your t-shirt, you cut out your gingerbread form, you stitch it up, you leave a hole at the bottom, stuff in your shredded t-shirt. That has just made, and then you sew it up. That has just made a magical construct of you. If you are trying to get better luck, you would put 2 or 3 pennies. 3 is the better number. 3 pennies in with that stuffing, and you hold them in your hand and you wish for more success, better luck, to attract more into your life, and then you put them inside the doll. If you're trying to heal your anxiety, then you're going to want a little bit of dried lavender, which is one of the best things for anxiety. Chamomile will work as well. You put that in with the doll as well. You bless, empower, and activate it in your dominant hand to heal your anxiety, to release your fear. The same thing might go for something having to do with depression or hopelessness. You're going to want to go for more invigorating things, which can be loose tea leaves, it can be coffee. Cinnamon is the easiest one. Cinnamon is the easiest one. You take about a teaspoon of that, put it in your dominant hand. You want more vitality, you want more joy, you want more energy, you want more inspiration, you want rapidity in your life, things to happen with greater speed. Then you put that into the doll as well. Sew it up so that stuff's not spilling everywhere. And you've just made yourself a magical construct. But how do you use it? One of the things that you can do is you tell this, you hold it in your hands, you tell this particular doll what you're afraid of, what's worrying you, situations that cause you anxiety. As for instance, if you need to go and give a big presentation or you have a meeting that is worrying you, you would sit there with this doll that represents you. Now, can you do this to other people? Yes, but there are karmic implications. Anything that you do to another person, you need to have consent. Because even if you're well-intentioned, if that person is not consenting to you interacting with their energy, then that is a violation of their boundaries. And what would the karma that results from that be? Somebody violating your boundaries and you having to learn what that feels like. So that's why we want to keep in mind, do unto others whenever we're doing magic, because no matter the practices you do around it, you are inviting that energy into your life by trying to create it. When we're talking about thoughts creating our realities, some of the times we have to let go of our counterbalancing darker energy. So in love, the opposite energy is fear. And so that's one of the things that you would be offloading into this construct. You tell your troubles to this particular construct. You can, if you're really uncomfortable speaking out loud, you can sit there and simply think it. You can meditate holding this particular doll. And then what you want to do is you want to put it in your bed at night, because your subconscious energy will also be absorbed. And then in the morning, what you want to do is put it on a windowsill or someplace where sunlight can reach it. If you do not have access to sunlight, if you're living in Svalbard, which is this island close to the North Pole that I watch on TikTok all the time and has 6 months worth of darkness, put it underneath a lamp. Light that is manufactured is not as healing as sunlight, but that is the thing that you might do. Talk to it about what you're afraid of. We have to choose to be courageous, but that does mean that we also have to choose to deal with our fears head on. And even if your anxiety doesn't make sense, if you're saying, I have to go and meet a friend for lunch, but it's making me really anxious because I know I have to drive there. I don't know if I have to, where I'm going to be able to park. These are the things that you are telling to or vibing at the doll. You put it underneath your pillow as you go to sleep. It could be one next to you. You can also, if you're like, I can't sleep with that thing, it smells like cinnamon, you can also put it on your bedside table or put it on something clean, put it on a pillowcase or something underneath your bed, directly underneath the head of your bed. These are the ways that you are projecting that energy into that doll. And then you put it in the sunlight to help alleviate it. Anxiety and depression often respond to, and this is medical science stuff having to do with vitamin D and the things that, because vitamin D deficiency is actually exceptionally common. And if your even supplements aren't going to alleviate it as well as natural source will. One of the things you can do for insomnia, for anxiety and depression, and all of the other things, more vitamin D. And if you're not comfortable getting it, because let's face it, cancer can result, you can put your construct that you have made to deal with your anxieties, your fears, your worries, sometimes the mindsets that you're having trouble releasing. If you came from a great deal of poverty, I've shared a little bit about ridiculously traumatic childhood that I had at the lowest level possible. So I experienced all of these things, bullying, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect. I have an ACE score that is technically 10. And it's because I had a whole bunch of things happen that they didn't include on that score. So I never had anyone who was incarcerated, put in jail, which is one of the markers on the ACE score, which is the Adverse Childhood Experience Test. But what I did have was multiple natural disasters and multiple sudden deaths. So that's not one of the things that's covered on there, but it kept happening to me. And whenever I laugh like that, that is actually a trauma response. It's the one thing I haven't been able to fully resolve, is even I'm like, wow, that was like, somebody wrote that in terms of that seemed very methodical and purposeful, but it kind of was. I needed to understand something so I could engineer ways to fix it for myself and for others. This is one of the ways you can fix your fear and anxiety, is you make a magical construct. Now, what if you're like, I'm afraid of needles, because some people might have a fear of that. You go on Amazon, you go to Michael's, you go to Joann Fabrics, and you look for rag dolls. There should be dolls that are canvas dolls, cloth dolls, paper dolls, anything that is something that you can then treat as a construct. Please don't have it be a baby doll, a Madame Alexander doll. Why? Because it's a little bit hard to explain, but that was created with intent, and so it has another energy signature on it. You want something that is void of an energy signature. And so the other thing that you can do when if you put it in the sunlight and you're like, no, I'm really not much better, start putting it on a bed of salt in the sunlight. Salt is one of the things that helps negate energies. You can put it on table salt, you can put it on sea salt, you can put it on pink Himalayan salt is exceptionally good for fear and anxiety. You can work with that particular construct of offloading your energy onto that and helping you to have an exterior source to help it resolve. The other thing that you want to do is remember that the whole idea that our thoughts create our reality is used within the law of attraction. But in the law of attraction, that is made for people who have already resolved their shadow side. If you can't ignore your shadow side, you have to do your shadow work in order to be able to manifest. I work almost exclusively with trauma survivors. Every now and then I get somebody who had like a beautiful childhood and I'm still able to help them because they're trying to achieve something, but it's a different kind of reading for me. So the law of attraction tells you no negative thoughts, but it's normal. Emotional repression and trying to control your thoughts that involves ignoring parts of yourself causes a buildup of energy, causes shadow side energy to worsen, to intensify. You have to admit these feelings in order to release them. So if you're having anxiety, if you're having fear, if you're having depression, if you say, I think this world is hopeless, because hopelessness is the other thing that you can use a construct to help heal, you talk to this particular construct all about it. Now, what if you're like, I'm very, 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 very uncomfortable with it. I cannot release the idea that it has something to do with voodoo. Get yourself a teddy bear. Because teddy bears are not like dolls. We hold them close. We project a lot of our affectionate energy into them. They're cuddled towards us. They absorb our personal energy, and they're usually not meant to resemble a living figure. They're a cartoon caricature of bears. So get a teddy bear or a stuffed bunny will do as well. If you really just are like, I cannot make a doll, I cannot make a doll, it gives me the creeps. Get a soft plush toy, not very big. You do not want gigantic things. You want something where the concentrated energy can then be put into the healing light in order to have it released. Now, if you have an injury, can you do things like bind different healing herbs onto that, on your elbow if you make a doll? Because I always have weightlifter's elbow at this particular point because I screwed up doing some upward rows and I'm apparently never going to fully heal from it. It's been there for about a year. It's much less than it used to be. I did not use a magical construct to try and heal. Why? There was a lesson there for me in quit trying to do more all the time. That's what happened to me is I kept adding exercises and adding exercises because for me, enough is never enough. And so I would keep going and keep going. And so I got an injury that was trying to teach me something. In fact, I spent much of 2024 trying to resolve some injuries that I had accumulated from being unwilling to admit I was overdoing it on exercise, on hiking, a couple of other things. I had to have more respect for my physical house. And I was aware that that was the lesson I was being taught. So I did not make a magical construct to deal with that. But I do have a magical construct. I actually do use a teddy bear that has to do with if something's really bothering me at the end of a day, because when I work with clients, I'm essentially a human battery. And so people always tell me they feel much better after they talk to me. It's because it's an energy exchange. I'm giving them healing energy and I'm taking from them a lot of burdens. Sometimes I need to offload those at the end of the day. And so I will literally go to a teddy bear that is kind of yay big. I've named him Winston after the volleyball in Castaway. And I will talk to this teddy bear about it. Does it feel weird? It does, but it also works because releasing that energy makes me understand it's not mine. My job as somebody who does energy healing, because I do tarot, but I do a different form of tarot. I do predictive tarot as well, but I prefer to help people heal their stuff because that's what it seems like it's there for. It's interesting and it's sometimes nice and it's sometimes very helpful to understand what's coming up. This is going to happen here, that's going to happen then, this is going to be resolved at this particular time. What is a far more potent tool for tarot is to say, this is what you're struggling with, and this is how you can resolve that struggle to live in a more abundant right, which abundance is the birthright of pretty much every human being who is reaching for the best intent, trying to be the best version of themselves that they can be, which is what we're doing on a spiritual journey. So, and then what do I do with that particular teddy bear? He hangs out in a patch of sun the next morning. He's sleeps actually at the foot of my bed, and he doesn't sleep. I put him down there at the end of my bed, and that's where he stays in the morning. Then the sun comes in and hits it, and that's one of the ways to essentially disinfect an energy. And this is all superstition. It is, as far as we know. But because energy management does have an application within, positive thinking, people have understood that that can alleviate depression and anxiety. Believing in good outcomes. One of the advice, the pieces that I've heard from therapists, with their clients who are just envisioning the worst case scenarios, because it's a fearful world. They'll say to them, well, what if you start telling yourself, what if everything turns out well? What if you meet the love of your life? What if you get your dream job? These are thoughts to introduce into the energy that you're creating. Because whereas we kind of manifest our realities, what we really do is manifest our attitude about life. And when we're in this very open, happy energy, more comes to us than the things we're trying to manifest come to us. And so you have to offload these natural human emotions that more sensitive and empathetic people get. So when I do my work, I'm giving something. I receive money in return. There's an energy exchange, but I'm taking a burden that I need to get off of me so that I don't suffer from it. So that's what I use a particular construct from. And why didn't I sew a doll? Because it's not my stuff. It's not my stuff. I did not want to make something of my own materials because I'm offloading other people's stuff. It's my way of getting rid of this particular energy. And what you want to do in order to really lean into how do I offload my energy? I understand what a magical construct is. And then I'm sure everybody here can make the logical leaps of, okay, well, what if I really wanted to do this for another person? What if I have their permission? So let's assume for a moment that you have the consent of another person. How could you use a magical construct to help them? You would have a personal item of theirs. If that is not possible, you make something called spirit paper. And spirit paper is made by making 7, 9, or 11 petitions. It depends on corresponding numerology, helps a lot in magic, what you're trying to achieve. You write their name and birthday on 7 or 9 or 11 separate pieces of paper 3 times on each. And then these are hand-torn petition papers, so no machine cut edges. By the way, that is a little bit of a psychological mind trick that we play, because any planed paper, you can't get rid of every machine cut edge. It's manufactured, and so it's going to have had contact with it. But the energy that you're putting into it as you rip or tear those machine cut square corners off of is making it your own. So you're imbuing that with your energy. And then you burn those particular slips of paper. You save the ashes, you grind them up with intent, and you say, this is the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul of your target's name. This is the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul of your target's name. And every time you grind one, and you need to grind them separately, that's what you're saying. And that's what you would pack a candle with if you're trying to do magic for somebody else. And again, I am assuming that you have consent. Would this also work if you don't? Yes, it would, but please pay attention to what I said about the magic that we do towards others actually does come back to us in an amplified form. So be careful with what you do. That's why one of the concepts behind Wicca is, as long as it harms none, do what you will. Harming another and interfering with somebody's free will is an issue. In fact, when we're doing celestial and angelic magic, in order for angels to intercede in your life, you have to ask them to. Our guides do all kinds of stuff because they already have a soul contract with us. They're here to guide us. They can block us. They can lead us. They can, this is a lesson and it'll be a harsh one, but you will enjoy this challenge as it will teach you about the strength that you are trying to develop. Our guides have our permission from jump. Our angels need to be given, I asked the Archangel Michael to intercede on my behalf to block all forms of evil, attachment, and deception. Would be one of the things that's what you have to do. You have to invite non-human energy, because angels are not human. You have to give them permission. It's why you have to be very careful when you're meditating if you think you're being approached by anything, and that is it's always best to not, if it asks your permission for anything, please deny it. Please, because things can pretend to be something that they are not. It's why one of the best things to invoke beforehand is actually the Archangel Michael, which you do not have to be in the Christian practice or in the Christian religion. I am not a practicing Christian. I practice celestial and angelic magic. Do I try and live by the teachings of the central figure of Christianity? Yes, and that is not very common in actual Christianity. I try really hard to. Does that mean I'm perfect at it? No, because I deal with a lot of volatile compounds within myself, but I'm always working on it. You invoke the Archangel Michael, and anything after that, before meditating, invoke the Archangel Michael, because that is the opposite energy of the darker force that has sentience, which in that particular religion is, referred to as the devil. Is the devil real? Not in the way that Christianity depicts it, but is just as there is a divine source that has the sentience of the collective consciousness. In the darker aspects, there is I don't want to call it demonic force, we'll just call it a darker force that also has a sentience that is serving that particular realm. The divine serves the light, that particular realm serves the dark. And it's not as personal as people think it is. It's not so much evil. It is more that it's doing its job. We need that counterbalancing energy to basically hold our reality together. Now, everybody knows who listens to me for any long length of time, I like to talk about psychology. I'm very interested in research that backs up different things. So why do I believe so much in magic? Because I have a lot of evidence in my life that everything that I do actually works. It has since I was a child. It's very, very interesting to me. And that's the other thing that I kind of want to talk to you about with the idea of golems, because we can accidentally create what is basically a receptacle for our projected energy. And frequently it is found in love interests or in enemies. And so what happens when people believe themselves to be in love before they truly know somebody and they really love them, they just have this, chemical attraction to them. They will imbue them with this vision of who they believe themselves to be and aim it at that target. And that's what they will really, really, really become attached to. And sometimes it will work to draw that person closer. It is a form of love magic without even doing any spell work. But it usually falls apart if it is based in a false construct, like the person that you're thinking of, that's not the real person. Unfortunately, anger, animosity, and other things can also be directed at these golem targets, these projections. It's a form of mind magic, where that's how you're trying to deal with your anger, your frustration, your jealousy. And it's often seen in jealousy. If you're jealous of somebody who's thinner, taller, better, richer, whatever it might be, please remember the thing that you think you're jealous of, it comes with absolutely every other experience that person has. We cannot cherry pick parts of a person's life. But that does create a karmic burden, because if somebody with strong energy, it's hard to affect them. Someone who doesn't have strong energy, unfortunately, it does impact them. And that was a difficult lesson for me to learn. I've spoken a little bit about how angry I really, really was in my 20s. I was furiously angry because I really did have a very hard life growing up, and I didn't get why. I understood at a different point why. It's like I needed to understand this to be able to fix it, to help other people fix it as well. And I could fully believe that I signed up for that. It's like, no, that makes sense. I understand myself to be that person. Which is not like I'm some saint. It's just that I like to fix stuff. So it makes sense that I was like, I'll do it. In that cosmic area, me raising my hand to be like, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I understood that. But when I was a very angry person, I often had somebody I was very, 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 very angry at. And I noticed across the board that it started to do something to their lives. Now, could it be a coincidence? Of course. Correlation is not causation. But when we're talking about magic that has no scientific backing behind it, but we know about the power of the energy of our mind, we can't prove it. It's seen it happen over and over again. Anybody that had long-term anger had things start going wrong. Frequently, they would be depressed, they would be anxious, they would lose a great deal, they would be ruled by fear. Their greatest fears would start to come to be. They would be cut off from their creativity. When I became aware of it, I tried to repress anger as a way of like, oh my God, I would never want to do that to somebody if it was because it was mostly a subconscious thing. So I tried to repress anger. And then finally I just understood, talked about with myself. I've never really worked with a therapist on most of this, what was making me so angry, and I resolved it. So now when something makes me angry, I do go and I talk it out, and I don't need another, I can talk it out with myself. I can think it through. I've become very good at examining what is happening with me. And sometimes there is no cause of an emotion, and that allows me to release it. But some people are working with projection to release anger. I know my ex-husband used to do that a lot. He always had a work enemy wherever he was, a person that he just disliked at a disproportionate level. I don't know that it ever did any harm to him, because I'm not positive he can do any forms of magic. but he did it religiously. He always had somebody, and when he ran out of people to project his anger on, he tried it with me. Now I have a lot of things that protect me, and it did not go well for him. It did not, like, he's not like, missing limbs and, dying of cancer or anything, to the best of my knowledge. I have no contact with him. But that, when he tried to project all of that anger, resentment, and disappointment, I guess, in life, it just kind of it blew up on his face because I had so much protecting me. But I did invoke that protection. And that goes back to, if you need help, if you feel like somebody is interfering with your life, invoke protection. Look up protective prayers. Do it every day until such time as you feel like you're clearing that energy. Because other people can't reach us if we put a lot of energy into protecting ourselves. And while you're protecting yourself, you do your dark energy work, your shadow side work, you release it, you step into your greatest energy and into your greatest power. And when you're stepping into your greatest energy and your greatest power, that does not mean you won't still, if you're a sensitive person, have a predilection or a predisposition towards fear and anxiety. And that's where these construct dolls can come in, or these magical constructs. Give it a try. If you have been struggling with, I cannot get rid of this depression, I cannot, and you might cry, particularly when it comes to depression, you might end up crying. Stop fearing the idea of letting your emotions out. They're only gigantic to start. Once you start forming an inner dialogue around what's really bothering you, you can let that energy out, which allows your more hopeful energy to come to the fore. The proviso is that brain chemistry is a real thing, and things can get so out of balance that you may need medical help. And I am somebody who really, really, really urges people, if you are thinking about harming yourself, if you feel no reason to go on, if this has been persistent and there is no cause, because situational depression you can resolve it if you do your healing work, if you do your processing work. It can be an ingrained or a predisposition, a genetic predisposition towards a chemical imbalance, and work with that. We wouldn't, when I'm talking about like being in the sun because we need the vitamin D from it, and then every day these days I drink chia seed water because it's one of the best sources of minerals, of calcium, and of iron. And because of my diet, because I don't eat meat, I can struggle getting some of those. It's been very, very invigorating, but it's also a very grounding thing as well. And it also allows you to, flush all toxins out. And it does come out in all the ways that bodily things do, but that's also part of releasing negative energies. Awareness of where your thoughts are going is one of the things that can help you manifest a better reality. But many of us in uncertain times are actually struggling with these darker energies, with these darker feelings, with anxiety and with fear. And this is one of the ways to be like, just like with food poisoning, you got to get it out or it's just going to make you sicker. Think of your thoughts being put into words. I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that, I'm worried about the other thing, but you're putting it into this construct that you then leave in a healing situation. You salt whenever you're concerned about it. There are all kinds of things that you can do with these particular constructs to try and make things better. Meaning that if you're very, very worried and you have a construct made in order to deal with your worries, you tell it all your worries, put on some meditation music in the room that it's in. Why do you want to program that? Because there's an energy exchange. So it's resolving that energy, but also as you are focusing on it, when you imbue that particular construct with a healing energy, such as the sun, such as the negating substance of salt, meditation music, there are all kinds of healing frequencies all over YouTube. I send them to my clients all the time. They're all free. Whenever you interact with a resource, please stop and hit the thumbs up button or make a comment. Be kind, because anything negative you put out there will come back to you. But whenever you take something, try to leave something, because that will keep things in an energetic balance. It does not have to be money. It just has to be some of your focus. And it gives back to the people who created things that allow me and others to interact with healing resources for free. So what you want to do is treat your little construct like you're taking it to some form of healing spa every day. And it's almost always entirely free. You leave it in a room with playing meditative music. So the next time you pick it up and you're telling it all your troubles, it has just absorbed all of this energy. Can you put a crystal in it? You can, but I think it's a better idea to put the crystal by it and have the crystal beside you as you are holding this construct to offload your negative energy onto. And what will that do for manifesting success and abundance? It will clear your path. The unhealed wounds are one of the biggest obstacles in the path of abundance and success. And whenever you think abundance and success, if all you think about is money, that's a form of attachment. Remember, being happy, being grateful, living in a joyful experience are all forms of success. I've been doing all this work. I will cover this in another podcast that I'm going to do about the easiest ways to connect with your guides and your ancestors, which will be pretty much the next thing coming up. By the way, I'm taking the week of Christmas off. I'll mention that again at the end of the show, but there won't be an episode during the week of Christmas. But the next one that will be coming will be about how to connect with your guides and your ancestors. Please remember that one of the easiest ways to connect with ancestral magic before doing any of this construct work is to dance. Put in happy music, dance around. It does not matter if you suck. And why? Because you're trying to connect to a higher vibration. Remember that there are other realms and that is where that ancestral energy is. It's in a non-physical realm, but it is still proximate and available to you, but you have to be able to take the appropriate actions to be able to reach it. So dance around, singing, skipping, doing whatever you want. It will raise your vibe. It will give you access to your amplifying ancestral energy, because even if you don't have a magical bone in your body, I'm like, I am absolutely positive that my Presbyterian forefathers did not sit around and do any forms of construct magic or healing magic. They didn't, but you don't know who they were related to. We all come from somewhere. And the idea of prayer is actually a form of magic. One of the funnier things, and like not funny, haha, it's just a little bit of an irony to me, I was thinking about this today, was that like people will look at the idea of magic and be like, that's evil, why would you ever do that? Oh my goodness. And a lot of the times they are part of the Christian religion, which is a religion literally based on a human sacrifice. It's like, but there's magic at the very core of that. The idea of a sacrifice of energy, the idea that Christ was a form of golem or construct for the healing. And we are still, after a while, by the way, when you offload your energy, when a portal is created for healing energy, which is what that particular death was supposed to have done, it doesn't then absolve you or solve you for the rest of your life. Our thoughts are within our control. If you find yourself thinking unkindly about somebody, correct it. And it's very human too. One of the biggest struggles I have with my clients is I'll see envy or jealousy within their cards, and I'll start talking to them about it, and they get very defensive because we're associated with doing something bad. And most of the time, it has nothing to do with wishing ill on the other person. It's just noticing a consciousness of lack within your own life. Why is that person effortlessly thin? Why is that person 5 inches taller and looks great in jeans? We do all of that. But it's not about disliking another person. It's just being aware of a consciousness of lack within our own life. And we want to release that. It is normal. It is human. Everything you struggle with is normal and human. Now, it can be in different degrees, and people do develop personality disorders, but stop judging yourself for being part of a species that has reliably predictable outcomes, feelings, and impulses. Now, you do have to be aware of something called being atypical. Now, I'm extremely atypical. That is you fall with it. If 98% of people do something, then you're usually in the 2% where you will have a different reaction, you have a different need. And the easiest way I have of be aware what works for you. Try these things, and if they don't, adjust it so that it helps you. That is honest to goodness. One of the things that happened when I did the burnout episode was on YouTube. Someone who's a fellow tarot reader happened to comment, hey, thank you for this. Other spiritual teachers has told me if I'm really tired that I'm not doing it right. And it didn't track with what I believe, so this was really validating. And I replied to her, this is probably not a verbatim quote, well, it's like you do something where you give other people your energy, so you literally are draining yourself constantly. So it makes sense that you have a different answer. Understand that whereas there can be a range of what is normal, if you are atypical, which does include being above average in things like intelligence and energy, then you may have a different result. And the easiest one that I have or a different remedy. The easiest one I have to point to is that my whole life I have studied psychology. I understand what being introverted is and what being extroverted is. On the most simplistic terms, being introverted is you find social interaction with other people draining. Being extroverted is feeding off of that energy. It builds you up. And we're told that humans are social creatures and that we all have social needs. And in trying to conquer depression and anxiety, which again turned out to be a trauma response, I kept trying to do what was like advised within these particular, you do this, you do that. And it was always about social isolation is terrible for you. You have to have social engagements. You have to engage with people. You have to share with people. You have to, and I tried and I tried and I tried. And finally, I admitted that when even though I was doing it, I have to have 2 social engagements a month. I have to, it was always, I have to, I have to, I have to, I have to. I would dread it beforehand. And I finally started asking myself, how much fun am I actually having doing these things? And I realized it almost was never fun. It had to be something that was like a very particular interest for me, going to a museum with a friend type of thing. But that being around people, I was not merely an introvert, I'm a recluse. I have a reclusive energy. To this day now, I rarely read people in person because I finally noticed how it was just kicking my butt whenever I did. And it does have to do with the whole I'm a human battery, and people, whenever they're around me, can take some of the energy that I have, which is healing energy. And they feel better, but I'm taking off their stuff. And if I'm doing it in person, it's harder on me. And I finally had to give myself permission to isolate. Go ahead and isolate until you feel better. It's not, and it made me better. I stopped being anxious. I stopped being depressed. Now there is one thing. I do an exceptionally social job. I connect with people very deeply. I'm looking into their subconscious world and into their future. And so that is a tremendous amount of connection. So I'm reclusive in my private life because it recharges me. And then it's interesting because your guides will try and send you messages. Pay attention to how you feel after you try particular things that have been advised to you. If it is not working for you, by the way, don't give up on something unless you've done it 5 times. You do have to give yourself a chance to adapt to the idea of this is different, but it's beneficial. But you will notice after 5 times whether or not it is actually having any form of benefit for you. And my guides were trying to get me to understand that through a series of lessons that I'll go ahead and cover them, and that'll be the thing I close out with, because your guides are always trying to talk to you. They work with our choices. They don't make them for us, but they try and put things in our path to teach us. We look for our signs. And I had someone book at my office in Westlake, who he was a new client, booked on a Saturday, so that office complex was always incredibly empty on Saturdays. New client took the booking. He was offering to pay me more, which was like a little weirding me out because at first I was like, no, I can't do that today because I'm not in my office. And then he was really insistent. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And he offered to pay me more. I said, that's not necessary. And I went to my office. He got there. I looked in his cards. I get the 8 of Swords almost immediately. I was like, that is jail. And he's like, yeah, I spent last night in jail. And I'm alone in a room with this person who I do not know. It was fine. He was actually a perfectly nice person. He'd gotten drunk because he'd had a breakup. He got thrown into lockup. You cannot identify this person. So that is just what his brother, I won't tell you what was in his reading, but it was absolutely fine. But it freaked me all the way out because I realized, oh God, if he's dangerous, no one's going to hear me. Like I realized I was actually in a very, very, very perilous position. And so I started to be very selective. I made people have one reading with me online before I would have agreed to read them in person because of that experience. And I'm so glad I did, because I eventually had a client who I did actually have to send them away. Every now and then I have to fire a client who was insanely inappropriate with me during that Zoom meeting. And he wasn't on camera, so I couldn't even see him. I wouldn't be able to notice him on the street. And the entire time he was pressuring me to have an in-person reading. And I told him, no, I wasn't doing that right now. I was caring for my sick dog. Oscar was not well, and that I was not doing in-person readings at that time, but that I expected to be doing them again in the fall. He got right back in touch with me during the fall, and he was pressuring me so much that I finally told him, I'm not the reader for you. I've given you a referral. Please do not contact me again. Because there's more to this story, by the way. But he had actually been referred to me by somebody who I knew. And so it did not occur to me at first that this person is in any way dangerous, even though they were acting dangerous. They were acting like they were some kind of like weird predator person. And I let it go for like the first 3 times because they had been referred to me. And I got back in touch with the person who had referred me. I was like, that guy's been really inappropriate with me. And she's like, yeah, he's really inappropriate with me too. I was like, wait, what? Why did you send somebody towards me who is incredibly inappropriate? He's been putting insane amounts of pressure on me to be alone in a room with him. And it will never ever happen. But it was my guides trying to teach me, you actually do better at a distance from people. I'm an incredibly accurate reader via Zoom, and I'm a very accurate reader in person, but it's very, very tiring for me because they're not just taking my mental energy, which I have a ton of, they're taking my physical energy as well because I have a lot of vitality. And so nowadays, like I have to be pretty attached to the client. I have to know them pretty well before I'm like, I'll read you in person because I don't owe it to anybody in helping them to harm myself. And everybody needs to learn that lesson. There are very few situations in which harming yourself for another is ever appropriate to the point of emotional or energetic depletion. The one proviso is the choices you make to take care of your sick parents, your sick children, your sick partner. There can be meeting another person's emotional need because there is a dependent relationship that you have agreed to that is not imperiling your health. So always pay attention to how you feel when you're doing something that you've been advised to do, but always wait until you've tried it at least 5 times. When I finally learned that lesson I actually don't want to be around other people very much. I'm very happy by myself. Most of my interests are very solitary. I like to read, I like to hike, I like to cook, I like to study history. Everything that I like has a very personal focus in it because that's how I grew up. That's what allowed me to survive that creepy old childhood, was that I had plenty of time alone to recharge. And that for me, being alone is recharging. But the psychological community will tell you that that does not work, that it'll make everything worse, that it's self-sabotaging. And for me, it is self-sustaining. So even though I've given you a bunch of advice of you can do this, you can do that, not everybody is in the same collective. Even people who are teachers within this realm, not everybody has your answers. You may have something in which you're an outlier or atypical, and you have to pay attention to that. Try what you were advised to do and then make the adjustments that are appropriate for your unique soul. And if you're not like everybody else, just accept it. My life got so much better when I started to understand I'm not really an introvert, I'm a lone wolf. And not in some creepy, be afraid of me, she kept to herself, the neighbors talked about her in the news afterwards way, but rather I do best when I have plenty of time away from people because when I'm interacting with them, I give a tremendous amount of my personal energy, and that leaves me at a deficit. And it is because of a soul contract I made to try and help others. But I have a lot of healers here. I have a lot of therapists as clients. And that is the other thing to pay attention to is if you are struggling and you are struggling and you are struggling, find your solitary interest to allow your focus. Your focus is your willpower. Your focus is the thing that allows you to manifest the life that you want. Have a positive area of focus for you. And if you are like me and you don't do well intermingling with others, there's nothing wrong with that. You're not broken, you're just different. Not everybody fits inside the same mold. But the first thing to try is some form of magical construct when it comes to resistant anxiety and depression. There's a lot more with magic that we can be talking about, and I can do more magic episodes if you would like me to. You can leave comments or, send me an email if you want to. At therisingmoon@gmail.com is the easiest way to email me. I don't particularly like to text. That's a thing where I really enjoy being by myself when I'm in my off hours. But if you email me, I will get back to you. We can do more about magic. But first, in order to get the magic that you want, to have it be sturdy, to have it take deep roots in this reality, heal. First order of business is heal your shadow side, do your shadow work. And it's not to eradicate it, is to work with it and understand it. Even if it is something like every now and then you can be prone to jealousy or whatever it is, you learn how to talk to yourself through it. It's not about correcting it. It's about working in conjunction with who you truly are and never shaming parts of yourself out of existence. So this has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica, and we're talking about how to use constructs, golems, dolls, and other forms of, we kind of want to call them poppets, for emotional healing. There was a lot more in there about trying to individualize your experience with your energy management. And maybe someday all of this will be understood at a why does it work when it can't be proven to others? Only you can see the coincidences and the alignment and understand that there is a pattern here and that there's no such thing as this much coincidence without there being some kind of sentience behind it. And the possibility is that you're the sentience if you don't believe in a higher power. I personally believe in a higher power. I have a lot of reason to believe in a higher power in my own life. Not the God of the Bible, which is a construct for a patriarchal society trying to gain control over people and their actions to exploit them for their own ends. But there is, in my experience, there is something there that is beyond my own understanding, beyond my own sentience, and I do not believe it is just my higher self. And I have a lot of reasons to. Whenever I'm really, really in need of a solid cosmic rescue, something comes along and helps me. And I don't think it's just me. I just don't. Um, but I also think that we will be drawn towards the explanations that may not encompass the whole truth, but rather break it down into a form that we can understand while we are in this form. So all of the narratives around spirituality, around things like light workers, is it the literal truth? It is the way you can understand the literal truth, which is not exactly the same thing. So anyway, this has been Logical Magic, examining esoterica. If you need me for anything, you can find me at therisingmoon.com. It's the only way to book me. I have a Patreon. You can find the video versions on my YouTube, Chromecast at The Rising Moon. Thank you again for joining me. We'll be talking about more magic in the coming year.